Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
Melissa, here we are. We're recording our podcast in person together in the same room for the first time ever.
We're like looking at each other for realsies.
So we've made like 65 of these, all like
I know,
over basically
a year
through Zoom over the internet, and never actually been in the same room. So we thought it would be appropriate to talk about partnerships since you and I are partners, and we're here together, and it would be good to explore that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think there's all sorts of partnerships in this world. And I think when we talked about doing this, we were talking about doing it from a business perspective, right? And, but there's all sorts of partnerships in teams, in marriages, in friendships.
In art projects.
Exactly.
So, like, we've done a bunch of stuff together. We've had other business partners that in the past, right? So we both have like experience with
a lot of history,
good partnerships, bad partnerships, partnerships with different people, right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty interesting to think about like what makes those good, what makes those not so good,
right? Right.
And to me, like, good partnership is so awesome.
Yeah, I know.
Right? Being in the tech industry, there we see like a lot of almost like, and even in just like the entrepreneurship industry, we get this like almost like glamorized version of what we call like solopreneurs, which is like one person, they were so brilliant that they made like the most amazing product and just out of their own single sheer will change the world, right?
Yes.
In my experience, that is not a very common story.
No.
In fact, it is probably completely false and fabricated, because I've never seen a single person be able to do something as hard as entrepreneurship on their own. They've always had some sort of support. But we do see a lot of stories around partners, like pairs of people coming together and building something amazing. Right. Look at like Apple, right?
Yeah,
it was Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak.
Right.
Those were two very different people, but together, like
they made magic.
Yeah, they literally changed the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, John Maxwell, the leadership developer, always says that you can go alone, but it's pretty lonely and you're not going to get very far. If you're going to if you want to create something larger, you really have to do it with more than one person.
Yeah.
And I think too, people get, there's way more stories of partnerships not working, I think, than there are partnerships that are actually working. Yeah. So that's why I think it's fun for us to talk about today, because I think we have a very well functioning partnership.
I do too.
Even when we had a startup business years ago that there were times of that startup business that were extremely hard. And that's where most people would bail on the business and the partnership and then have all sorts of stories in their minds. Well, this didn't work because this partner was X. We never were like that. Not once. And I think that there's some things that we sort of pay attention to create a good partnership that hopefully the listeners might find interesting as they're venturing out to come up with their own things that they want to work on.
Yeah. It's interesting when, like I'm in Vistage, right? It's like our CEO roundtable thing.
Yep, which I used to be too.
Whenever like there's a new owner that comes into the group, first question, do you have a partner? And if that answer is yes, then it's like, ooh, let's figure out how, like, let's focus on that, because like, almost everybody's problem seems to be around like their partnerships, right? Their other shareholders, the other people that they have to work with.
Right.
And it's like, to me, I always think it seems to be like identified as a problem all the time.
Yes, exactly. Right. That's like, right. Yeah. There's always a negative spin on it. Right. Very seldom do you hear good partner. Seldom.
Right. Yeah. But in my experience, like partnerships are like critical to the thing I do. Like, I can't do it by myself because I don't have like all of the skills. Like, I don't like there's parts of like who I am that like I need a partner to help me like and help and bring the idea to life. Like I can't do it by myself.
Right. Let's talk. And I feel the same way. So like, I think it'd be interesting to talk about what are some of the markers that make a good partnership.
All right. Let's think about that.
So one of them that I'll say is, because this is the Self-Awareness Journey podcast, is self-awareness. And what I mean by that is, you know, like I've done 1 million personality assessments and you have too. Lots of people have at this stage of the game. But when you understand your own personality traits, when you're in something to build, a partnership or something, you're trying to build something and your traits are really, really good for certain parts of it. And then you probably have traits that aren't great for it. Like my level of detail, I'm using my own example, is very low. Whereas my vision, my big picture ideas of things is very high. Like I love thinking about stuff like that. But if it left to my own devices, I could come up with 1 million bar napkin ideas. And then no follow through because I don't have that. I don't want to say skill, because if I have to do details, I can be extremely skilled, but it takes so much energy and I don't like it at all. So for me, I know I need somebody to help in that area because I'm not good at that.
Yeah.
So I think just understanding where your natural personality is and how the other person, and if it isn't even something like that, it could be anything. But understanding that another partner can come to you with that sort of bonus, and I have the awareness of that, makes it a really good partnerip. Yeah.
So you're saying like complementary.
Yeah, complementary. That
like complementary, like personality styles and or communication skills, right? Like
and traits.
Generally, I'm like more introverted, so like I don't really want to go network with random people. Yeah. Whereas like you love that.
I love
so
that. Yeah.
Like that works out really well for us, right?
Yeah. And I think too, you know, conversely, in partnerships, all of this same thing exists, but with a lack of awareness about your own strengths, and then the lack of awareness and respect for the other person's can actually then create one of the biggest gaps and the biggest problems, which is interesting.
Yeah. Like I agree. Like, you know, when I had a partner for a very long time, and they're pretty different personalities, right?
Very different.
Which at the beginning worked really well.
Yeah, right.
Because he could do the sales stuff, I could do the code stuff, and it really worked. But after a while, it really started not working. Yeah, because he wanted to do different things, but he didn't get along. We couldn't figure out how to communicate. And then, like at that time, for sure, we were not very aware of like all the emotion that was like rising up because we couldn't figure out how to like basically like coexist in the company that had kind of like grown beyond its little startup
phase,
sure did. Right? It became like a legitimate big going company, and we couldn't behave like we did before. Right. So like the environment kind of changed, and we kind of changed, but we really were stuck on the old way. The old way. Yeah.
So not growing. So that's part of a good partnership too, is recognizing when the growth happens outside of the partnership, even those partners have to be aware of that and be willing to be flexible to adjust to it.
Yeah. And adjusting, that's a good way to phrase it, because
it's hard.
It felt like, like we didn't adjust very well.
Yeah. But that's where it is hard for everyone. Yeah. I think, like, I was looking back on, as you were talking, I was reflecting on a couple of my others, and I was in a partnership with 4 other people, and I was the only one in this country, and the other 4 were in a different country. But there was a lack of respect for me, and there was an expectation that my talents would be used to go do what I was supposed to do, which is build a brand. But there was a lack of respect for what I could do. And so what ended up happening is they ended up taking advantage of my strengths. And I was so wanting to please. And I was so wanting it to be a good partnership that I actually didn't advocate for myself in that partnership either. So there is a component of being authentic and owning what gifts you have that you're bringing into it, with a lot of, giving yourself that respect and giving yourself that benefit of what you're bringing. And then also doing the exact same for your partner. Right? Because you and I, you have really different strengths than I do. And I have such respect for that because I recognize them. Although sometimes those are hard for me because I don't understand them. Right? So, sometimes I have to be like, okay, I don't know what he's trying to explain, but I trust that what he's doing is good. So I have that expectation.
So you were talking about like the respect part and advocating for yourself.
Yeah.
What part of like a partnership, like what I kind of heard was like some confidence stuff, right? Like you understand yourself and you know what you're bringing to the table and you're confident in that.
Yeah.
It feels to me like if you are not confident about what you're bringing to the partnership, and that starts like a downhill slide as far as the relationship goes.
Yeah, because your stool leg is wobbly then.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. Yes, I think you do have to have some confidence about your own skill when you're coming in.
Yeah. And I think like, I'm just kind of like, again, like reflecting on my past partnership is like, I think that was a thing that really happened. I think my partner became really not confident in what he was bringing. And that turned into basically a death spiral.
Right.
Like we couldn't pull out of that.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like started hiding, started not doing the things that I felt he should have been doing because that's what what he used to do.
Right.
And I can never get past that.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing just from our own reflective conversation so far, we're just recognizing like there's core things that bring a partnership together, but then there's some validation that needs to happen from your own perspective. Like you have to stay solid in what it is that you're doing and know that that's what you're bringing to the party.
Yeah.
And that you can't expect someone else to complete you. You can't expect somebody else to make you be something or to convince you your strength is good.
Yeah, that's like an interesting part of that. Like in one way, like partners, should be kind of like champions of each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? But like not like
falsely,
like not like thin cheerleaders. Like, okay, let's go, we got to go. Like,
right.
And because like eventually that just turns more into like almost like a manager.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So I've experienced that too, where it's like we had a partnership, but what it evolved into felt much more like a manager, sort of like support, like one was subordinate to the other kind of role. And that felt terrible.
Well, and all the emotions behind that. Like there was a lot of emotion behind that too.
Yeah.
It's just like other partnerships in anything. Like you look in marriage, you look in dating and stuff like that. And so often people are seeking someone else to complete them. And in a partnership, that's not the healthiest way to start because you need to be complete in yourself. So that's one marker, right?
Yep.
What about in the partnership, however long it's been going on, what if you start noticing that the partner is having a hard time? This is a normal place too, where partners start to get real wonky, right? Because it can throw off the whole plan. It can throw off everything.
Definitely. So like again, from my experience, like, I had that, right? I had a partner who was not doing well, like, mentally, right? Mental health wise is not doing well.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
Right. Because I didn't really have much experience at that point with mental health issues.
Right.
And so.
Well, since you've been around me, you've had lots of experience. You're like a trained professional now.
But I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to support him. I didn't know how to help.
Right.
And part of the way I, probably wrongly dealt with it was I actually didn't really deal with it, right? It was just like, okay, we'll give him some space. Yeah. We'll let him sort his stuff out. I'll like basically take over running the whole ship. Right. Mm-hmm. Which wasn't helpful to the partnership. Right. And so, how you address those, and sometimes they feel really delicate, right?
Oh, gosh,
because you don't want to go up to someone who you've known for 20 years and be like, oh, hey, I think, I think you're completely failing at your job, and you're
I'm going to strip you of everything.
Right. And
out of security and safety for the business.
It's just like, and it's hard to have those hard conversations, right? Like, this isn't working anymore.
Okay.
Right?
So that's another good one, how to have hard conversations. Like, that's a critical component to being in a good partnership, right? Because you have to, in business partnerships, you're talking about a lot of things that have a lot of energy for people. You're talking about ego. You're talking about money. Oh, yeah. You're talking about status.
Well, that's the other, you're right. The other problem when we're talking about business partnerships, they often turn into or bound by money and asset, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I remember referring to him as like, I'm more married to my business partner than I am to my wife. And what I was like saying was like, we have more assets together in the business than I do with my family.
Yeah.
Right. So, and when we're almost more bound to each other than my spouse because of like the company and the 50 children / employees that are within it, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
So
that's so true. And
that is such a big dynamic of a business partnership.
And as you're talking about money, I start thinking about, Vistage or any other CEO organization, or if you're in any mentorship programs with anybody and you're trying to build something and you talk about partnerships, everybody gets real animated around the conversation of setting a partnership up and never have it 50-50.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's always like they're always gunning for whoever they're talking to have at least a slight leg up.
Control.
Yes, right? Who has control and in the legal documents and blah, 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 blah. And again, our society has that mentality around equality can't actually work.
Yeah.
It's almost like, well, as long as you have 0.5% more ownership, fine if you want to be all equal and everything else like that, but when the rubber hits the road, you'll still have control. That's what that message is.
I never liked that energy. Like I don't like it. I don't like being superior or subordinate. I like the evenness.
Right. But that's not, I don't think I think people that want that are seen in the business perspective as not being smart.
Yeah, I take it different. I've seen it so much. Yep. I see it as actually being scared.
Oh,
it's like a fear. It's like a fear thing.
Wanting to control out of fear. Oh,
wanting to control out of fear.
Yeah. Huh. That's really interesting. What do you think are talk about what you think the benefits of a partnership are versus going at it alone?
Well, okay, so. There's so many. I mean, actually, I don't think I've actually tried anything of any substance. Like maybe mess around with little side projects. And stuff. But I've never tried anything of substance without a partner. Right? Because I just don't understand how it would work. And because to me, a really important thing is co-creation. Yeah. I'm a really big fan of this idea of co-creation. Yeah. Because it is fundamentally the way the universe works. Right. In my view. Right. If you look at we'll talk about married couples, or people, right? The way people reproduce is co-creation. Yep. Right? Yeah. You can't have a baby by yourself.
No matter how thin you slice it, you've never ever done it by yourself.
Right. Yeah. So it's to bring something into the universe shows us that you need co-creation, you need pairs, you need, whatever, or maybe more than that, right? Like, but you need many elements to come together in a harmonious way to create something new. So my artistic view of everything is that that's how things should be. So when we talk about businesses and ideas and art projects and this stuff, it's so much more fun when it's done in a partnership way, because that feels natural to me. And like there's a spark, right? There's something happens. There's like magic there.
It's funny, like just even you and I with creating the self-awareness journey, everybody's like, well, what's your agenda? And we're like, we don't really have one. No one actually buys that, right? But it's funny because we are so interested in constantly creating this. But it's funny, if I get stuck on something and I can't do it, I lob it to you and then you either sort it out. Like right now we're working on a script, right? We've been working on one video script for weeks.
Months.
Well, okay, Melissa it was actually on my plate for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks.
Double digit number of weeks.
And finally I was like, I can't do this. And you're like, fine, give it to me. I can take a run at it. And you had it for 1 week and you're like, you know what? This isn't actually working. I think we need to do it together. Right? So that would be another example of just being aware enough and having the presence of mind enough to trust the partner to create it with you without ego, without worrying about what it might sound like or what it looks like from the outside. So I think trust is another really big one.
Oh yeah, it's key.
Yeah, all of these are key. Yeah, it's really interesting. So like, what are some good, if people are entering into partners, into thinking about having a partner, or even if they've had a partner for a while right now, what do you think are some, can you think of any good questions or ways that you handle conflict, or if there's a challenge with something, how do you enter into that conversation? Or like, what if there's a conflict?
Well, okay, so
a healthy conflict.
Yeah, well, a healthy conflict is good. Like I'm a big fan of conflict, right? Like find it, get it out, right? But you have to practice that. Like that's not like you don't want to be like bull in a china shop and like upset everybody. But like to me, there's so many moving parts, and there's so many, like, we're not very good. I feel like we're not very good, especially like from our emotional being, right? For our, and some of our like more primal instincts, we're actually not very good at dealing with these complex situations like businesses and businesses that have partnerships, right? Because we've got these like primitive social constructs that drive our emotions. But we're in
sticks and rocks. You mean.
Right. But we're in an environment which is like a complex business economic situation, right? So we're trying to use like our logical brain to think through things. It just gets like so off balance so easy. I see it in my coaching clients all the time, where there'll be a core issue that they are bothered about, and they will wrap so much cotton around the rock before they throw it that it isn't even the same issue by the time it comes out. So I just missed it, the whole thing.
And then it doesn't allow the person that they're interacting with to even understand where the true root feeling came from.
So there's a couple things that are really important, are like really getting in touch with yourself. Because almost all of the problems just start with you.
Know thyself.
So like understanding like what these emotions are, what these thoughts are, trying to get to the root of them. Sometimes it's really hard. So being content in that way, trying to understand what's happening with you, expressing and sharing that with your partner,
which is like, hard too.
Being like courageous enough to be vulnerable in that way.
Exactly. Right? Really well said.
Which is really hard because again, you don't want to be the failing partner. Right.
Yeah, you don't want to be the bad guy.
You don't want to be like, hey, I can't do it. Right.
Or you don't want to be the bad guy that creates the conversation, that creates anger or causing upset. You don't like being that person who does that. None of us do.
the other thing is just making sure you're not blaming your partner.
Yes.
Right?
That's blame really good.
Because like again, complicated business situations that we actually like think we have control of.
Right. We have no control.
Well, we don't have control of it. Like,
no,
it's
very little.
It's too complicated, and there's not.
Yeah.
And so, but what happens a lot is like something will go wrong. Then I'll say, "Ooh, that was in my partner's court."
Yeah.
Blame them, right?
Yes. I'll still look good.
Yeah.
But it isn't that way. You are a reflection of the partner.
Yeah.
Right.
So
you forget that.
Making sure not to blame your partner and just understand that they're probably also trying to do the best they can. And being more upfront. I think like when you're in like even friend groups or employer, people, like you said, put a lot of cotton around things. They just kind of let's just make sure everything stays cool. We're not like whatever. In my experience, not being upfront enough with your partner causes way more collateral damage than you intend. Like
totally.
You think you're actually protecting them, but you're not. Right. You're actually just causing way more damage. So, again, being strong enough to say, hey, this part is upsetting me. This part's not working. I'm stuck here. Right. Like,
I'm feeling, and it's a lot of I statements. So like that's the beneficial way of entering into that, is to talk from your own frame of reference and really just focus on explaining how you feel without blame and without expectation. Like that's the other thing. Cause I think when there's a lot of expectation in a partnership, it can create resentments.
Definitely.
So
expectation, and even worse, like unsaid expectations or uncommunicated expectations, right?
Yeah. This is it's an interesting thing. There's a lot to a good partnership, especially a long-term partnership. And I mean, just as we were talking about we were talking about the communication piece, respecting each other, respecting ourselves, having trust with each other. The other thing, and then you said being vulnerable, which is really good. And then I think the other one too is assume goodwill.
Yes.
It's really easy to get uptight about something. You had a bad day. You're supposed to work on something. Something doesn't get worked out. You don't do it or whatever. And if you aren't staying really clear, you can start telling yourself a story. That's not true because you're upset. Yeah. Either you're upset about something in the partnership or something outside of it, but that is one of the relationships that you feel safe in. So a lot of times you can just kind of go after something that's not even true. So assuming goodwill, assuming that person is doing the best that they can, just like you are. I think that's another really important component to that.
Yep. Well, I'm a fan of partnerships.
Me too.
We even talked a little bit, maybe we should probably have like a second partnership podcast, because we even talked about like, as we were getting ready, 50-50 partnerships versus partnerships that were, maybe 25-75 or lopsided, and how you and I are big fans of equal partnerships and how those feel. And those are, in some ways, if you're a business person, the most, risky. People like say those are risky. To me, they're the best. That's like the way it should be. So there's a lot there, but if you're thinking, if anyone out there's got a business idea, a project that they want to work on, I'm a big fan of finding a partner to go at it with, because it really creates something special. Right.
When this pod drops in LinkedIn and Facebook and all the other spots, if there are people that are interested more in learning about partnerships, one of the things you and I talked about doing was a whole training session, like going into more detail about some of the nuances of partnership. If that's interesting for people, drop us a line and let us know. We'd be happy to explore that.
Pod. We should have like a live partnership problems pod.
Oh my gosh.
Partnership problems pod. It's a mouthful.
It's a triple P. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.